Hi everybody. Last night when I was watching TV, I got out some tissue paper and my great big fat Posca pens and I made a bunch of marks for patterns. I've mentioned in other videos I like doing black as a contrast, but I also love doing a lot of them in white because I glaze those with colors afterwards. White gives me the opportunity to reserve what color I want until I see how it fits with the background. So this is what I did. I plan on using those today, at least some of them, because it's been a little while and I miss my tissue prints. So let's get moving. I've also got my Micron pens. I bought a set here that are two different shades of gray instead of my usual black. Light cool gray and a darker gray, and they actually look like graphite pencil colors. So I thought they'd be fun to do as a background funky script. I'm just scribbling, making it look like messy writing. Quite often I do this and I will actually say something in my head, but I'm not writing the words out. But later on I know that my intent was there. That's just something that I like to do. So anyway, you could use stamps if you prefer, script stamps, anything. I'm just trying to make a background, but I do like the gentleness of this light gray color. I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm going to do that again some other time. Now I've got a slightly darker gray, and I think it's the same nib, but I'm just doing it a little more condensed as to carry across the theme to the right of the spread, but slightly darker. I really enjoy this. I think this is going to be very successful. And I do intend on this MarkMaking to show up at the end. I'm not going to cover all of this. I'm going to keep my colors today a little bit less deep in color so that less opaque, because I really want to show you the value of making layers and having all of those layers show up one on top of the other, creating a final look at the outcome. So let's get started. Protect the pages. I've got it clamped on the left because the book is so thick. I'm getting near the end of this book, so it is getting thick. So I was trying to decide on what color. Previously in the last spread, I did introduce some blue, and my purpose today is to have a lot of blue. And so that previous spread was just a segue to introduce a little more blue today. I love to take these books at the end and fan them open on a shelf. And I like to see the transition of colors from section to section. So I think that'll be very successful. I've got this fluorescent chartreuse that I thought, maybe I'll use it as an accent, but my typical yellow gold, green gold that I'm using now, if you add a lot of water, dilute it with water and add it on a wet page like I'm doing there, it ends up being quite bright as it is. So I'm not sure if I'll use the other one. I've just got it there on the side if I change my mind. Now I've got a lot of water on the page and I haven't protected the page, so anything I put down will get absorbed right away into this raw paper. And that's why I'm keeping my colors delicate and soft at the beginning. It is going to absorb right into the paper, and so I don't want to go too dark to start with because then you can't take it back. And I really intend on revealing the script that I wrote first. I want to maintain the integrity of that, so I'm just going to delicately add layers of color as I work through the spread. I'm happy to do blue and green. I always love blue, green, black, and white. They're just such a terrific blend of colors. Look how bright that color. I didn't need that fluorescent one after all. Look how bright that is. It goes very citrusy when it hits a lot of water. Right out of the bottle, that green would be a lot darker. You know, I love to watch how paint flows across a wet page. I think the organic fluidity of it is fun. I like the surprises that it gives me. Sometimes I never know what I'm going to do on a spread, but when I keep things as a surprise, it allows me the opportunity to be open-minded a little bit more. I can't contrive things as much. I have to live with what I get, and that always spurs my imagination, and I always come up with things that I didn't think of in the beginning. So if you're sort of the type of artist that likes to be regimented and calibrated and very determined and set on what you're going to do, it's a little hard to get into this zone, but the more you try it, the more fun you'll find it is, and it gives you a lot of freedom to explore. Always mindful of dabbing the middle of the book there because it's a very deep crease, and water and paint wants to flow there and then bleed to the back. So I'm constantly, as I get too much water and paint in the middle, I'm constantly dabbing it with the edge of a paper towel. Look at the fun of this when you tip the page. It's going to dry really light, but right now I quite love what it's doing, so I'm going to preserve that. I'm going to let it just settle. That's a lot of fun. And to keep it in that bottom section there, I'm going to prop the book up so it doesn't all run off the bottom edge. I'm going to prop it with a brush just to keep it more level. I'm just having fun with watching how that dries. And it did dry completely more pale, and all that fun, interesting detail kind of disappears because it's spread out quite wide into that fresh paper. But that's okay. I am enjoying how the page is starting to look a little marbled. I like that effect. So these are the prints I'm kind of thinking. This big wonky script is a choice. I want to do some dots, and I want to do some other shape dots as well. So I'm just trying to think about in future what I want to do, and I'm putting those aside. Before I do that, I want to add a little more depth of color across the spread because it did dry much more pale than I want. You can see the graphite script. I love that middle part there. It's quite marbly, even though it's quite pale. So I'm going to try and preserve that and enhance it. But as I was saying, I want to keep the integrity of that script, that graphite-looking script in the background. So I'm just easing in more color as we go along. I'm dabbing right out of the bottle because my paintbrush is wet, so it doesn't come out full strength. Plus, I've sprayed the page again, and it's disappearing into the water. Watch what happens on the left spread there in the middle, how that marbly effect is even getting more interesting. I love it. Really like that. If I would have put matte medium across this page first, things wouldn't have dissolved into the paper like they have. So I'm quite enjoying this today. Dabbing that center again. Look at the fun of that middle area. Just coaxing things around while they're wet. Look at that middle area. That's a lot of fun. I'm keeping the entire spread delicate looking. I love what's happening on the bottom right there, how it's getting a darker marbled effect over top of that script. I'm going to enhance, because I added more value to the blue, I want to add more value to the green to balance them. And I'm using my long brush. I forget what this brush is called. Somebody will tell me what it's called. I used to know what it was called. It's very long, soft bristles so that they delicately move the paint around the page. It's one of my favorite ones when I'm doing a wash of colors because it keeps things delicate. I don't really want to have obvious paint strokes in this page. It will dry a little lighter. I don't mind that the bottom, the very bottom is quite dark. I don't mind that. It brings the eye down there. So I'm adding a little more blue in the top to balance that. Again, all of these will dry even lighter, but I am slowly, as you can see, building layers of color. And each time I do it, I spray water and let it disperse organically. So much fun. I'm so in my zone at this point. I don't have any worries on my mind. Now I'm just going to let it dry naturally. This is so much fun. Completely dry. I like what's happening up there, and I love what's happening in here. What I want to do is add a little bit more green below it, but I don't want to touch that little middle area because I want the green to be directed to that but not touch that. So I'm going to get some more green glaze out and be mindful of that marbled area. I'm going to stay away from it, but what I'm hoping is that by adding more depth of green here, we'll give a contrast of the two areas and it will point each other out. I think it's going to be successful. And then I'll give it a spray of water so that it disperses naturally. That's fun. A lot of fun. This is going to be a shorter video. Look at that. Look at how fun that is. It's going to be a shorter video today because this is turning out already quite amazing as it is in my mind. And I don't want to overwork it. At this point now, because I have more things on the background, I can bring out my tissue prints. I really like the idea of these tiny dots, but they're not going to be everywhere. So I'm just taking a peek in the back to see where I want to stop it. I'm going to get a clean brush and dip it in clean water and make the outline of where I want to tear away the tissue paper. It was a little bit, the water was just a little bit green, but that's okay. It's going on top of a green area. You've got to make sure when you do that, always have a clean brush and clean water. So that's the approximate area where I want to put it down. I want to bring out these smaller dots in a row. So I'm isolating with the wet paintbrush where I want to tear that part away. I want to do it as a band of a double row. I tore away the very tip because I didn't want, once I glue it down, I didn't want a straight line of tissue to be obvious later on. And now I've got a third area. I'm going to do three different varieties of circles. I like these fat ones, and I'm thinking I'm going to shoot that over there because I think it's very strong, and I need the balance over on the right. And I love these big open circles that on the bottom there. I think that the contrast between all the shapes is quite wonderful. And that was all from just sitting down watching TV and doodling with circles. You don't have to use a gel plate or anything. You just grab your tissue paper, put it on a hard surface, and start making shapes. So I'm quite liking what's happening there. I know I'm going to add a big scribble with the fatter Posca pen scribbles later, but right now I want to get these glued down to the page. I'm thinking of that as another option, but I think it's too strong. It's not saying what I want it to say. I quite like what I have. And I also, again, I like the openness of some of those circles. I don't want to detract from the beautiful marbled background and scribbles that I've already got there. So I'm trying to find prints that don't fight with it, but work with it. I hope you don't mind I explain all my thoughts as I do it, because to me, that's how you learn and grow. If I was just to do this in front of you, it'd be the same effect, but I like you to learn why I made decisions. Now I'm putting matte medium all over the spread because two things. I want to protect this background layer. This is one of the few times where I could say this background layer is my real background. It's not going to get covered over very much. And I want to protect it completely. So I'm putting a full layer of matte medium all across the spread, but while I'm doing it, I'm also going to glue down these prints where they go. When I've got a big piece of print like that, I start from the middle and I fan outward. Otherwise, you can bunch up the tissue. It can fold over on itself and you can have quite a mess. Isn't that fun? Look at how that print transforms the page. I mean, yes, you could take a Posca pen and just do that right now, but if you didn't and you didn't like it, it's on. Whereas if you do it on tissue prints, you can move them around as you saw I was doing, playing around with locations of where you want it best. I really like that these circles are hollow in the middle. I think that's really effective. I'm using a big paint spreader there to press it firmly into the crease. I love that. I think that's a good contrast against the little dots. And it reveals everything that was below. I really appreciate if you like and subscribe. And if you think this is of value, please share it with people. It's really hard as a newbie on YouTube. It's 10 months now for me. It takes a long time to get into the algorithm. And I really want more people to see this. So any time you could like and subscribe and share, all the better. And I really appreciate it because I love doing this painting for your soul, and I really want to reach out to as many people as possible because it is so therapeutic. I'm suffering a lot of sciatic pain from a cyst, and so I go through a lot of pain, but this just helps me, and it could help anybody else in a similar situation to get lost in their zone and not worry about any of that. Just have fun playing in your art journal. Look at that, it dried. Look at it again as my thumbnail promises. This shows you how printed tissue papers can transform your artwork just like that. I'm trying to decide which scribble I like. I've got a few of them to choose from, and I'm just holding it over and getting a feel for what it does for the spread because I'm loving the spread as it is, and I know I'm not going to change it too much, and that's why I'm able to, at this point, really take a good decision here, make a good decision on which one I want. Bring it. That one's really wonderful. I love it. But I think I'm going to stick with this one. So I'm going to get a clean brush, clean water this time, and I'm going to brush out with water the entire perimeter of this shape so that I don't have too much excess tissue beyond it when I glue it down. And if you use the paintbrush with water technique like this, it gives you a very random organic edge, and it almost disappears completely when you glue it down versus cutting the tissue out and then gluing it down. Usually when you do that, you can see the edges more. So this is what I prefer to do. It works for me. Yeah, even with a Band-Aid on my finger. And usually it stays away from the painted area fairly well, but just it's delicate. You got to get the knack for it. Let's get that down on the page. I really like the idea of it overlapping on top of the dots. I'm doing that on purpose, and I like that that part in the very middle that looks like an F, it goes right down to the bigger patch of darker green there. I like how it goes over the dots and then hits that. I'm trying to look at other options, and I do like this. It works. It actually shows quite a flow of pattern across the spread. It would work, but I really want to go over top of those dots. The juxtaposition of the dots in the background, I do like to shoot them into the background, shoot this into the foreground, and I like the idea that it creates layers. So that's where I would like to keep it. That's my ice maker, if you can hear that. The only problem, I don't enjoy those smeared dots on the very left, so I'm going to smudge. I say smudge because I want to delicately add some white paint just over some of those dots. But I've mentioned in other videos, and you're going to see later on what I'm saying, that white paint texture when it dries is very smooth, and when I add glazes over top later, it's going to hit that paint differently than when it hits the paper. So if I smudge it around a bit and then spray it with water to disperse even more, it makes that white paint a little more cloudy and delicate, and it won't be quite so obvious later when I glaze over it. There will be a bit of an issue, and I'll circle that for you later. Keep that in mind. But I like what happened. And even if I wasn't to glaze over it, I like that that white area matches the white area in the middle here, and it works. So if I forget to glaze it, I know that it still works as a spread. I'm really pointing out all those white areas and the white areas there and how they work. Now let's get that down. I think that's quite fun. And while I was doing things, I saw this other print and I thought, let's bring another shape and bring more white to the page in a completely different way. They're not circles, they're in between circles and squares, and I think that's fun and wonky. So I'm just isolating what I want. What I want to do, what I'm hoping to do, the effect is I want a bigger, again, this is another shape, even bigger, but I don't want it to dominate the page. I want it to stay subtle. So let's see how that goes. If I would have taken a big paintbrush and dipped it in white heavy paint and painted those on my spread, they would have had the same look, but it would have been a different effect. They would have been very bold, and I don't want them to be bold. I want them to stay subtle. So the Posca pen ink paint on the tissue is a lot flatter and not quite, it's opaque, but it's not quite as, the relief isn't there. So it's going to blend into the page really beautifully. I'm just trying to decide how I want to orient them. And I like that there's big holes in the middle so that the scribbles below will show through. And it dawned on me that maybe I could hollow out the middle of them with some water there, but that's going to be really, really finicky and tricky. And as I put the water down to wet them, I realized I don't need to tear that out. It's going to be effective anyway. It's going to absolutely not be a problem. So I left it as it was, and they are still going to reveal all that background when I put them in place. I just love those scribbles. I love those new Micron pens in graphite colors. I think that's fun. So let's get that pasted down with some matte medium. And I want to purposely get them right down so that they just about touch those black circles. Actually, the one area does. And my reason for doing that is so that they all interact. Look at how fun that is. The scribble shows through. There's just a top section there that folded over on itself. It's a little bit bulky. I'm trying to just flatten that in place. And I'm just scraping away some tissue there that was a little bit dense as well. I'm just using that while it's wet. But I just love how the middles are still revealing what's below. So I've got the effect of big bold shapes on my spread now, but they blend in beautifully with the smudgy areas, cloudy areas of white throughout the rest of the page. I'm really happy with this. I'm pleased. And I want to bring the eye towards the bottom of the page by putting that one a little lower. But again, you can still see the colors and the scribbles in behind, and what I've created now is layers. I'm just using my finger delicately to push any folds of the tissue paper that happened in the middle there. I hope you agree that that was really effective. It gave me a bigger shape, but I didn't want to get a pen out and make great big, oval shapes. I love how cloudy and fuzzy they are. And now we've got this one to go over top of all of that. This is definitely, not even literally, it's in the foreground of the whole spread, but visually it's going to pop to the foreground as well. And I love how it overlaps the dots, and I purposely want it to come down and touch that circle. Fan from the middle out. And be delicate, because remember, that tissue is fragile, because I kind of tore it in different areas, and it's very, very delicate. Use the paint spreader there to push it into the crease again. There you go. I love this. This is so fun. Again, it's going to be a shorter video because I don't want to, I'm already almost there. I'm quite pleased. Sometimes it just works out that way. So I like how everything touches. They don't quite overlap except for the dots, but they touch each other and they help move the eye around the page and give rhythm. Now you may think, well, the right side of the spread, there's not a lot happening in the middle there on the right. I like what's happening there. I love that. Love, love, love it. But right there, it needs something. But I don't want to do much. I do not want to detract from what's already there. I just want to bring the eye over there a little bit for balance. But for now, I'm going to deal with that white paint area that I used over the dots. Remember how I said paint's going to react differently over top of that white paint? Here's where you're going to see what I mean. So I've got some green out, but I want to water it a bit so it's not too dark. I want to match the color I've got already, but as it hits that white, you'll soon see the white's really smooth, that white paint, and it's not going to stay on top of that white like it would on top of the paper. This is called glazing, where you take a semi-transparent color and you glaze over top of other areas so it still reveals what's below, but it adds more intensity of color. And what I want to do is delicately go over some of the green areas, because I want to bring those white shapes forward, but I'm not trying to outline everywhere. I'm just trying to make it subtle and not predictable. So I'm not going to fill in the middle of those circles. I'm only going to dab a little bit where it makes sense. And there, again, see how it rolled off that white paint and rolled down? And because the page was thick there and sticking up, I have to clamp that down. I'm going to have to clamp that down so that I can keep that green, that new white green glaze on the top left. I want it to stay where it belongs. So I'm going to clamp it in place to keep the page flat and encourage that glaze to sit where it needs to be. And I'm going to prop the middle of the spine with a brush so that I can keep the flow of that new green glaze going towards the edge of that page. And add a little bit more right down with my fingertip, right where it needs to sit. As it dries, some of that green will shift as well, and it might reveal a little bit of that paint area, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm quite happy with what's happened. Now I want to bring up, because I've added the intensity of the green glaze, I want to do the same thing in some of the blue areas, just to balance the values of the green and the blue. I'm still going to have darker green and darker blue areas, and light green and light blue, and they'll all balance together. I like the mixture, the shading, if you will, of the greens and blues. So I'm not going everywhere. I'm just going to dab it, and I'm using a soft brush, and I'm just smushing it around wherever it makes sense. Again, I don't want paint strokes. And because I added matte medium on the spread, it's not exactly disappearing into the paper anymore. It's floating on the surface. So it's really easy to still keep coaxing it around because the page is smoother. Look at that. The more I do this, the more it jumps those 3 white rectangles or squares to the foreground. Isn't that fun? I'm shooting the background more into the back, and it's making the white pop forward. Love it. And that very far edge I had from a previous spread. I obviously had paint and matte medium on my finger, and when I turned the page, it touched the edge of the page and it left an imprint. And now that I try to glaze over that very far left edge, it's too smooth and it's not going to absorb, but that's okay. This is not a canvas for the wall. This is an art journal. I like how that area that I circled, those 2 white squares there, they just disappear into the middle of the page. They're bold at the bottom where they touch the green, and then they disappear into the middle. I quite like that movement. And I'm balancing the bottom right in blue with the bottom left. That area that I circled is my favorite area of the whole book, the whole page, I mean. I just love all the things happening from all the layers. If you were to, hear me talk about the layers and MarkMaking and how everything gets revealed, that's the effect. You can't get that without doing layers. I'm really happy with what's happening, really liking it, but right there I feel like it needs something. And I had again last night, what I did was I took the white Posca pen and I made squiggly wavy lines and dots and marks. And then I took the blue Posca pen and did blue over top. What happens is now when I put these on top of the spread, the blue doesn't pick up the color below. It stays blue because there's white below that's opaque. So it just makes it opaque instead of transparent as a print. If I was to just do blue over the tissue paper and then put that down over green, it would change color. And because I had a little bit of a smudge in the very middle of the book there, right above my finger there, it just talks to that previous blue smudge. And I purposely want to lay it down on top and overlap the top area of that white square. This adds a dimension to that area that needed something without interfering with what's below. So I'm definitely overlapping just slightly. And then all of those make sense. Those ones that I'm pasting down join that blue smudge on the left. Isn't that fun? I'm really, really delighted with how this turned out. It didn't interfere with my favorite part of the spread. Look at that. Quite fun. That's it. I'm finished. Here's my spread. I hope you like it. I hope you learned from it. Those 2 areas there, to me, bounce forward first. The rest all blend in various layers underneath. That's my favorite section. Look at how amazing that is. I love everything about that. Everything. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day, and I hope to see you soon. Please like and share. Thank you.